Hello, I'm David Speers. Welcome to PM Agenda. Kevin Rudd has sparked a war with the Green movement today with the release of this white paper on Australia's carbon pollution reduction scheme. But the Prime Minister has also put the coalition in a very difficult political position indeed with this document. Under the plan he has unveiled, Australia would cut its emissions by between 5 and 15% by 2020. 5% if the rest of the world does nothing, 15% if there is a comprehensive global agreement. Now, this is less than the European Union agreed to over the weekend. They've gone for a 20% cut by 2020. But here's the catch. The Rudd government argues that on a per capita basis, Australia will still be doing more. It says per capita, this target that it's outlined today of 5 to 15% would actually be 27 to 34%. So it's saying that Australia is doing more on a per capita basis. Now, the Greens are outraged at this. They say it's a broken promise, that it's dangerous and that it's a real blow to the credibility of the Rudd government. The reaction from industry has been more positive. However, they are still concerned at the impact this will have. And the coalition is also starting to shift towards a compromise, it appears, with the government on this. We'll be getting all sorts of reaction coming up on today's show. Now, there is more compensation in this document for the big emitting industry sectors than there was outlined in the earlier Green paper from the government. There's also a whole lot of compensation for low-income earners and also middle-income earners, but particularly low-income earners. Some will receive 120% compensation for their out-of-pocket electricity costs as a result of the carbon pollution reduction scheme. But most of the attention will be on this target of 5 to 15%. And as Kevin Rudd spelt it out at the press club today, he met the full force of the Greens' concerns about this from 3 young protesters in the crowd.
By the end of 2020, we will reduce Australia's carbon pollution by between 5% and 15% below 2000 levels. 5% below 2000 levels is our minimum unconditional commitment to reduce emissions by 2020, irrespective of the actions of other nations. 15% below 2000 levels and our commitment to reduce emissions further. If there is a global agreement where all major economies commit to substantially restrain emissions and advanced economies take on comparable reductions to that of Australia.
As Kevin Rudd ploughed on, those protesters did continue to express their concern. Coming up, we will be talking to the Greens Senator Christine Milne about just what the Greens wanted and why they believe this is a dangerous outcome. We'll also hear from the Australian Industry Group Chief Executive Heather Ridout about what business thinks of this approach from the Rudd government. First, though, to the opposition, who will be crucial in deciding whether or not this thing gets through Parliament and becomes a reality. The opposition have, of course, been maintaining that there should be no emissions trading scheme starting up in 2010. They believe that's far too early. They've been arguing 2011 at the earliest would be appropriate. But there does seem to be now some willingness to shift on this. I spoke a short time ago to the Shadow Minister for the Emissions Trading Design, Andrew Robb. Andrew Robb, thank you for your time. Is this the sort of scheme that the coalition will support?
Well, this is a very complex document. There's some 800 pages in the document and a very lot of complexity, a lot of changes on the Green paper, as I understand. And we will take a considered view over the next few weeks and come back sometime in February, later in February, and report, whether we'll seek amendments, whether we support it, whether in fact we oppose it. But very important, I think, it's such a big issue that we spend some time and get some expertise. We've now commissioned an independent review by a major economic group in Canberra, and that'll be taking place over the next 6 weeks.
So that's the Centre for International Economics you've commissioned to review. Will their report to you be binding? Will you take their advice on whether or not to support this?
Well, we'll be informed, and heavily informed, by what the Centre for International Economics has to say. They're a very experienced group, and they will provide, in many ways, a unique perspective, because the government has consistently refused to model or to assess the impact of the global financial crisis on the ability of companies to, in fact, introduce this scheme. And secondly, all the government's work has assumed that the rest of the world will in fact, join some sort of global deal on climate change, when in fact that may be in doubt. So we've got the Centre for International Economics to look at those possibilities and what impact that would have on the white paper and its outcome. So we'll be informed by that, and we'll be informed also by our contact with dozens of industries and companies that we've looked at and talked with over the last few months.
But the changes to the Green Paper that you referred to earlier do include more compensation for those industries and a target range now that's been set of 5 to 15%, which many would agree is more towards the conservative, cautious end of the spectrum. So is this the sort of change from the Green Paper that you would at least welcome?
Well, look, all I will say on this, David, and I do want to be very constructive in all of this. This is a very important issue. We're committed to doing something of great consequence, as the government is. The point is we've just got to get this scheme right, because once it's in place, it'll be very hard to make any significant changes. So getting it right up front is very, very important.
All right, but it doesn't sound like you've got any major criticism of this white paper then so far.
Well, David, the fact of the matter is it's so complex. There's 800 pages. And what we found last time with the Green Paper, the devil was in the detail. If we listen to the speech
you're not criticising the target range, you're not criticising the compensation mechanisms.
What I'm saying is we will approach all of those with an open mind. We'll approach the start date, the targets that have been suggested, but we will be heavily influenced in making an assessment on whether those things are appropriate or not, on whether this white paper will lead to Australian companies being forced to go offshore and in turn having emissions forced offshore. So that is really the heavy criteria on which we will place any assessment over the next 6 or 8 weeks. But we must look at this in a very considered and objective fashion and not rush into it.
You said there you have an open mind on the start date. Now, my understanding was you were pretty firm on not starting this scheme by 2010, that you wanted it 2011 or 2012. Are you now saying you're flexible on that? You are willing to consider a 2010 start-up?
All I'm saying is all the reasons that we have advanced now for well over 12 months as to why a 2010 start date, in our view, is far too soon and is rushed and is likely to lead to mistakes. All of those reasons will be part of the mix that we will assess this white paper against. But we will...
So it is possible you will agree to a 2010 start-up for an emissions trading scheme if it's found not to have the damaging impact that you fear it might?
Well, what I'm saying is if the government has made major changes and has accommodated a lot of the concerns that have been raised by business, and we don't know that yet. We don't know that at all. If they have dealt with it, we will approach this. That's my point. We will approach this with an open mind on targets, on start dates, but very critically, we will be looking to see whether or not jobs are at risk in Australia and whether or not emissions and jobs are forced overseas because of the impact of this white paper and the actions of others around the world.
All right. Andrew, Rob, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
So